knew the heroes of 2022 would be Dr. Phil and Elon Musk?
I love it.
Let's keep watching. Oh, shoot.
All of a sudden, we're paying people not to work more than they get if they work. And then we say, what happened to the supply chain? Well, you paid everybody not to work. That's what happened to the supply chain. And I'm stunned that we're running this country in so many areas where we're just violating the most fundamental psychological principles that you could ever imagine. And I'm watching that happen, and I say, I just can't be silent about this anymore. So I'm talking about it.
What do you think is the root cause of this shift?
I think it's been happening gradually, but like everything, it's like if you start rolling a rock downhill, it starts getting faster and faster and faster. And I think it's happened for a lot of reasons, but I think we've got a whole generation of kids that are really smart, by the way. These kids are smart. But I think they've started living on their devices. It's kind of like along about 2007 or 8. It seems like airplanes flew over the country and just started dropping smartphones, and everybody's head went from here to here. I mean, think about it. When you look, you go anywhere, go to the mall, go just anywhere there's a group, and what do you see in their hands? You see a device. We didn't grow up with devices. When I started Dr. Phil 21 years ago, the first text hadn't been sent. There were no social media platforms.
And you have to think about that. A lot of people are going to hear it and be like, okay, boomer, you don't like cell phones. Cell phones are not responsible for all of the world's problems. And there is something to be said for that argument. But there is also something to be said for the divide that's been created between real human experience and digitized human experience. Because now, what is more readily available? Is your community that you are living in, that is right in front of your face, more readily available? Or is it another community of random individuals who you've never heard from and you do not know on Twitter? Is that more readily available to you? It's definitely the latter of the two. So, and for example, I grew up in rural conservative Florida around a bunch of white people, was convinced that they're all racist, even though if I had taken a second to do this, I would have realized that they weren't. But I didn't take the second to do this because my phone was telling me exactly what everybody was, and I could get 10 social media videos of somebody explaining how racist white people were instead of talking to 10 people. What happens quicker, what is more readily available, and it is whatever is here. So when we talk about social media and just the digital world being real estate, it really is real estate. And you have a bunch of elites who are using their money to invest in space in your mind. It's exactly what they're investing in. That's why data collection is so important right now. That's why people like Elon Musk taking over Twitter is creating such a ripple effect of leftist freakouts. It's because you have a handful of people who are buying up real estate in your mind. And when somebody puts a chink in that armor and says, you know what, I'm going to do it a little different, or I'm going to allow for other people to speak, or I'm going to allow for other people to get ideas, they start freaking out.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting point to say that, for all the heat that Gen Z gets for being fragile or being a little messed up, they deserve the benefit of the doubt because they're the first generation that was raised on smartphones and in the age of social media and never, like as a millennial, I remember pre-dial-up internet. I remember I still had at least a little bit of touch with the analog sort of world. And it's just all so new, and it's sort of like, you can lament technology, but technology is going to happen. It is just unfortunate that this generation came of age before we really knew how to manage it healthily and properly. And then you add on top of that people who are trying to weaponize control over social media platforms, just the nature of capitalism and us not knowing how to regulate it properly yet. Yeah. They run wild with the algorithms, and then people trying to use it to game for their own political aims. All that's real. But I feel like Gen Z's just kind of been caught in the middle of that just by virtue of being born at a time where all this new technology just swept the world so quickly. And of course it's going to have psychological effects. And of course that's going to, set you up for for having a difficult time navigating it. And so, like Dr. Phil's point, we're looking at down at our phones, but it's not something that, because I'm often critical of Gen Z, but I have some sympathy here because if I'm born in that generation, then that's going to be my norm too. And it's I'm glad that now we're finally coming to the place where we're realizing and think, okay, we should maybe look at some of the effects this has had on us and how do we undo some of those, and then how do we regulate it on the other side and not let these platforms be weaponized and not let them just running away with capitalism and hacking our brains for attention and all that.
Yeah, I hear from girls who are like, the guy I met at the bar doesn't have social media. Or I hear from girls who say, I just went on a first date and he doesn't have Instagram. That's horrific. How does he not have Instagram?
Do you even exist if you don't have Instagram?
He must be psychotic. He must be a serial killer for not being on these platforms. I'm like, girl, no, that's your man. Lock down that man, because clearly he is aware of what is wrong with these systems and what sort of ill intent they have prepared for him, and he's knocked that out of his life. And we've totally flipped. We talk about this idea of a social credit score and digital currency and the government having control over everything that you do and being able to tell people your value based on what you are doing digitally, as if that's not already happening. You guys, we've instituted our own social credit score in nearly every industry. Like, even on a small scale, you think of like modeling or acting, you walk in, and I hear this from so many people in LA now, they'll walk into like a casting call or a go-see for modeling, and they'll be like, how many Instagram followers do you have? And it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are, anything like that or whatever. It's like, oh, you managed to appease our social credit system, you've got the job. And we are just voluntarily placing ourselves in these systems. So we can only get a worse social credit score than we already have. Let's keep watching Dr. Phil.
None of that stuff was going on. Technology's great. Listen, I love technology. But we've got generations that started living virtually. They're watching people live their lives instead of living their own lives. And that changed the metrics on everything. Think about that. TikTok, Instagram, all of this, you're watching other people live their lives instead of living your own. And that changed everything.
And I often am thinking, I'm just like, should I not be doing this? This sounds like a problem, and it seems to be a problem that I'm contributing to. And every time I sit and think about it long enough to actually look at the implication of it and my own role within it, I'm like, we are fucked. This is not good. But I get sucked into it. I went out to dinner with a friend last night, and we ended up talking about like YouTubers and things like that, and we got to the subject of Emma Chamberlain, who happens to be a really famous YouTuber who's just gotten famous about being her real self and putting that on the internet. And it's interesting because I watch people like that, I'm like, oh, such a nice girl, love it, but what am I getting out of this other than watching somebody else live their life? And that is insane, but there is something so enticing about it. There is something that just gets the dopamine flowing of watching somebody else on social media do something that you admire, do something that you would want to do, live a life that you may want to lead. And now it's getting worse and worse and worse, where we talked about social media previously being a highlight reel of your life, and we knew, oh, it's not realistic. You're in Hawaii every other day, swimming in the blue water like Alexis Friend used to be on Instagram. And now it's like, oh, now I'm showing my relationship on the internet. Now I'm giving you a house tour on the internet. Now I am talking about my family problems on the internet. Now I am crying on the internet. Now I'm telling you what I learned in therapy on the internet. Now I am streaming myself, waking up in the morning, going through the day in my life. I'm streaming. Some people stream themselves sleeping on the internet. And the threshold for being seen as authentic is getting higher and higher and higher, to where your entire life needs to be on the internet in its most realistic form, or people are not attracted to you anymore. I was watching this girl who works for a social media company, and her whole job is predicting internet trends. And her prediction for the internet trend of the next few years is going to be, how real can you be on the internet?
Which we already have seen, like on TikTok, like a lot of times there's this sort of performative vulnerability that we've seen, that it's like it sounds and looks like vulnerability of people crying and sharing their darkest moments and stuff, but it's performative in the sense that you're recording yourself crying for the internet to post it, and it's like as a substitute for processing this in a healthy way, you're just blasting it on the internet, and kind of like it's that weird integration of the private life, public life, and it seems like a very unhealthy way to process things. So
you would think,
yeah.
But people are finding it healthy and saying that, oh, I'm so glad we're normalizing this. So then you fall into this issue of, okay, what's worse, being real on the internet or being fake on the internet? What's worse? Like, and what's worse for society? Is it worse to show young women a falsified version of life? Or is it worse to show all the crooks of yourself, all the emotional outbursts and anxiety attacks and all that stuff on the internet? What becomes...
Yeah.
Because with one, with the first or the former, you're giving people an unrealistic expectation of life and something that they could pursue day in and day out and never achieve. And with the second, you are glamorizing what are the bad parts of life that people should not be vying for, but are now vying for because you're famous for doing it.
You shouldn't be taking your cues from the internet on what your identity should be, where you get your validation, what the good life is. That's something that shouldn't be negotiated in public view, or you shouldn't be taking your idealized character, the way that you should live your life, shouldn't be coming from the internet. It should be coming from the old analog way off the internet, and in your actual real life relationships and families, and you knowing your values, knowing your identity. Because if you have a strong sense of self-worth, you don't need the validation of the internet, whether it is because they think that you're rich and pretty and famous and go to travel and do all these cool things, or because they think you're awesome and vulnerable and stuff.
And I think these are conversations we're going to begin having, because we're just going to find that it's not good and it's not having a good effect. You have all young girls in particular are particularly susceptible to this sort of trap and the trap of the internet. And it could be that they're just not the best at developing a sense of self. And I think women struggle with that a little bit more than men do. You guys can disagree with me if you feel the need to, and I would love to hear more if you do disagree with me. But I do think women tend to struggle with their sense of self far more than men do. And when they hop on the internet and see these girls crying or see these girls with anxiety, and they go, well, I sometimes feel that way too. And now this girl's famous and she's got millions and millions of followers. Maybe I should give into that a little bit. Maybe I need to be more vulnerable to that part of myself instead of viewing it as something to overcome. And it's not necessarily the fault of the girls who post this stuff on the internet, but I do think it's an unforeseen circumstance and an unforeseen side effect of them doing it. Because I'll go on TikTok and scroll through, and I see so many girls. I sent Taylor a video of this girl like sobbing about being divorced from her husband, and now she doesn't see her daughter as much, or her daughter has problems with like seeing one of them and not the other and all this stuff, and she's just bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, okay. On one hand, this is a real human experience. She's showing this to presumably other mothers who are going through similar situations, and it's probably nice to know you're not alone. On the other hand, she's getting millions and millions of likes, and is just being affirmed in what is peak vulnerability. And that's not to say you shouldn't affirm people for feeling the things that they feel, but also, how long do you want to sit in that for? It's not a good thing to sit in. Even though your situations may be very, very hard, what we should be looking for is the upside or the way out of it. And the internet is certainly not asking you to look for that at all. They want more of that. They want more of the crying.
If you're looking to make your way in the world and figure out who you are and how to, locate your sense of self and your sense of self-worth, what the society, what internet offers you is not healthy and very confusing. And once upon a time, it was embedded in our culture that these ideas of values that, hey, you have value because you're made in the image of God. You should take pride in your character and be known by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. And you should have a good work ethic and make something of yourself. And those ideas, those are like forgotten and even things that we look down on and rebel against now. And the alternative that we're providing to young people is this either performative vulnerability on the internet, go be a TikTok star. No wonder young people are so lost and confused.
Yep. No wonder.